Some international organizations like Amnesty International work with you also?
They would check in. Again, every foreigner who came to Kosovo at that time would check into our office. Okay, that was your first stop. And you knew if you went to the U.S. office, first of all, you had people who spoke English, so there's no problem communicating. Secondly, there was a really nice cafe next door, and you'd probably get a nice cup of macchiato free. And, you could sit and talk for an hour, 2 hours, however long you wanted. The Americans were always happy to get visitors and to talk to them. Just part of being an American, I guess. But it was also our job, and we were very happy to meet people and brief them on what we knew at that point. And again, to make introductions. My staff could just call over to LDK and say, hey, we've got these people from such and such. Can they come over and see Dr. Rugova? And, they would say, yeah, come over at 1 o'clock. Okay, so we would keep them entertained until 1 o'clock. Or we'd call Adam Damachi. Or we would call down to Prizren to go see Bishop Artemia or out to Gračanica. We just had everybody's phone number. And then as these various diplomats and NGOs came here and met people, they'd start developing their own contacts. They wouldn't necessarily need us anymore, but they would still keep checking in because we were the only constant presence that was international. Okay, obviously there's a permanent presence of people who live here, but you always want to cross-check your sources. Okay, so yeah, Albanians are telling me all these awful things, and the Serbs are telling me that everything's peachy keen and there's no problems. What's the truth here? And so they would check with us because we were the internationals. And at that time, I was the only American in Kosovo. I was the only diplomat. No, I take it back. There were 2 Americans. One of them worked for some NGO, I think. It was a humanitarian NGO, Mercy Corps. There was one American guy working at Mercy Corps, and there was also one American woman, but I think the 2 of them kind of switched out. So it was me and Mercy Corps, and we were it. There were no other Americans down here. At that time, there were 5 foreigners total that we knew of living in Kosovo. Besides me, they were all NGO workers. And it was, Mercy Corps, Doctors Without Borders, things like that. But it was Europeans and Americans. But I was the only diplomat. So now you look at Kosovo and there's like thousands of foreigners, running around everywhere. You can't avoid them. But at that time, I was it, and so everywhere I went, the police and intelligence from Belgrade were following me. And every Albanian knew that if they talked to me, they were going into the files of Serbian intelligence. But at that point, they didn't care, because if anything, that might have even provided some protection. A lot of times people were called into the police for questioning after they would talk to us. And, I always told people just, tell them the truth. You don't need to protect us. You don't need to lie for us or anything else. Be honest about it. Tell them what you were here for. You can tell them what I said, for example. You don't need to hide or, protect us or, tell them anything wrong. They may or may not want to tell why they came to see me, and that's their choice. But as far as I'm concerned, I assume anything I said in my office was recorded anyway. I remember shortly after we moved into the to the little U.S. office in Dragadan back in '96. I remembered shortly after that there was an Albanian family about half a block away that was moved out of their house, and we saw all these blue vehicles, with Serbian license plates, unloading equipment there the next day. And it was like all this electronic equipment. It was pretty clear this was a monitoring station, to follow us. And they were, I'm sure, eavesdropping on everything that happened in my office. I'm sure they knew every word that was spoken in our meetings, but we didn't care, because, I mean, to be honest, I wanted them to know what we were learning about and how we were gathering information and how we were developing our understanding of what was going on down here. Mm-hmm. That they were on notice, they could no longer lie about it because, we were here on the ground doing our own thing and we could learn ourselves. And, with the police and intelligence, I remember a number of times my car was a purple Nissan Pathfinder. And it had Belgrade diplomatic plates for the U.S. Embassy. So obviously it was the only one down here. So every time I would drive around town, again, you don't remember this, but the Serbian police would patrol in body armor with helmets, and they looked like full combat troops. And at night especially, you would see them walking around in pairs, not regular traffic cops. These were always like fully armored soldier types, heavily armed. And they would be walking around town. They would go into clubs and restaurants and check everybody's IDs. They were very intimidating. But every time, a number of times, I would be in a restaurant and my car would be right outside, and I would see them like come around and look in the windows, and I would take the key fob and go whoop whoop, with the thing, and they would kind of jump and look around, and I'd wave at them, and then they would turn and walk away because they knew they had been spotted. And that was kind of fun, actually. But they never, ever talked to me, never bothered me, other than just kind of observing from a distance. So that was always kind of interesting.
I'm also interested to know, how was this life in Pristina at that time? Did you make any friends?
I had a lot of friends. I mean, everybody in town knew of me. I mean, look, I can walk down a street in probably any country of the world, and most people immediately say he's an American. I smile, I have that look, the way I walk, the way I swing my arms, the way I look. I look people in the eye, I say hi to people no matter where I am. They just know right off the bat I'm an American. And of course, back then, I was on TV a lot. I was interviewed by RTK and various TV shows. I was interviewed in the press quite a bit. There were a number of magazines that were published at the time. I remember Bukaria Janbali was a journalist for a magazine. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a women's magazine. What? No, I just don't remember. But in any case, you had a very active media scene here. And I was interviewed very widely. So, and they saw me on TV a lot, sometimes just making press statements or whatever. So people recognized me just about anywhere I went. I remember one time I was down in Macedonia in some Albanian village out in the mountains somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. And I walked into this little store, and the guy looks at me and goes, "Zoti Michael." And I didn't, that was all he said. But, he said something about televisor, and, even down there, I mean, they were watching the shows, and he recognized me in this little village in the middle of nowhere. So, people recognized me. They knew me. They liked to see me around town. Very often, somebody would pay for my meal or my coffee or whatever, and the waiter would just say, "Oh, it's been paid for, don't worry about it," things like that. So there was a lot of hospitality. And even now, there was a time in March of and that was after the war. That was a different time. But when I came back in 2000, it was a little bit different then. I mean, I was still on the media quite a lot even then, because I was spokesman for the U.S. office. But even after the March riots, which were, I think, in 2004, yeah, I was on TV with a group of political leaders with a British diplomat named Carn Ross. And Carn and I, he was British, I'm the American. we had a very, very confrontational meeting on TV with Albanian political leaders. And we called them out for not taking a stronger stand against this ethnic violence. And, you know, the church that I occasionally attended, as I said, I'm Orthodox. The church that I occasionally attended was attacked and burned. And I brought this up in the interview. You know, I said, my own church was burned tonight. And, you know, this is wrong. You know, you can't do this. This is going to hurt Kosovo's cause badly. You need to take a stand on this. And they were their response was not very good. But the next day, okay, so that night and the next day, I went walking around town with my senior local employee. And because I wanted to gauge public opinion, I thought, okay, I know everybody in Kosovo probably saw that interview. Now let's see how they react to me on the street as a way of kind of judging public opinion. And literally everywhere I went, people sitting in cafes, you know, they would go like, they're sitting there drinking their macchiato, and I would walk by and they would do this and smile. Or, you know, several people even came up to me and said, thank you for what you said last night. And these were Albanians. And, you know, I did not get a single negative reaction from anybody anywhere. Now, you could say, well, you know, what do you expect? You're an American diplomat. Of course, they weren't going to confront you. But people would say negative things to me if they wanted to. And on other issues at other times in the past, I, you know, had people say negative things to me. You know, what was happening at that point was an occasional armed attack on a checkpoint or, you know, on a cop or something. It was very, I don't want to, low key is not exactly the right, but small scale. But an actual armed rebellion, you know, with a lot of guns and firepower and, you know, a lot of violence and death, that had not started yet. It was just beginning. And, you know, I remember one time, this was kind of funny, you know, we tried to monitor both RTK and RTS, I guess it was. Yeah, there was like, you know, Serbian TV down here. And they also had Albanian language programs on Serbian TV. And I remember one time the newscaster, it was a woman, she was doing the news in Albanian on Serbian television. And she said, you know, blah, 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 Kosovo I Metohija. And it was like she was so used to saying Kosovo I Metohija that she was mixing it in with the Albanian. And, you know, even instead of saying Kosovo or, you know, whatever the politically correct term was, she would always use the Serbian construction in Serbian in her Albanian language broadcast, you know, which the Albanians are just laughing at this, you know, that it's so absurdly propagandistic and badly done. But, you know, it was all part of the game, I guess, at the time. But in any case, I had not met anyone involved in that. This was still all out in the country, you know, like out in the countryside in Dukajin and, you know, the other areas. And we had literally no contact with them at that point.
You mentioned the Duce family, the Duce brothers.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, now that would have been after 2000, right? Yeah. So when that happened, you know, again, it was this very alarming thing that we were afraid was going to trigger more violence. You know, you had this killing of 3 brothers, obviously a cold-blooded murder. You know, this was not, there was just no way to justify it. And
they were American citizens?
Yeah, and they were American citizens. So now it involved consular issues, you know, death certificates, possible Social Security disability benefits, you know, dealing with their effects, with the, where do they want to be buried? I mean, stuff like that. I mean, they were buried here, but, sometimes when American citizens die abroad, even if they've been living abroad, they still want their bodies to be sent back to the States. And, that's the kind of stuff that consular officials deal with. So with the Bertucci brothers, there were all these consular issues around it, but also just the escalation of violence, that this could trigger more. And back in my second time in Kosovo from 2000 to 2004, there were constant things happening that, like tit for tat violence, ethnic attacks over here, something over here, some kind of provocation over here, there was just this constant stream of these things, whether it was at a Serbian monastery or an Albanian village or, killings of people that was very suspect, and so on. But by that time, we had a big political office here at the U.S. office, and I, as the public affairs guy, did not really have to deal directly with them, because other people were responsible for that, but we still had to deal with the public affairs fallout, with the impact on public opinion, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And always trying to be a calming influence, because that's something that the American chief of mission is always trying to do, is to calm things down, to reassure people, to show that we're doing something, to get them to be patient. That's just kind of a part of a diplomat's job. You're always trying to calm tensions and to get people to sit and talk instead of fighting.
And were you here in 2008, Independence Day?
No.
No.
Missed that one, unfortunately.
Did you watch it from the phone?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was following it definitely from, through TV and newspapers in the States and so forth, but sadly I missed that. But I was here for 9/11. Because that was a huge event, obviously, for Americans, but the way Kosovars reacted in support of the U.S. over 9/11 was very, it was amazing, the support that we got, and the fact that I think one of the pilots was a Kosovar Albanian, who was hijacked. And, so there was this Kosovo angle to it, and a positive angle, not a negative. I mean, not the hijackers were Kosovars or anything like that. And I think the two of the window washers who were killed at the World Trade Center were from Kosovo. There was just all these connections, and it demonstrated how closely intertwined our countries were becoming. And I think that's only gotten more so since then.
Yes,
and the AUK is a big part of that too.
Sure.
That's going to be an agent of greater integration between our countries in future generations. Every generation, we're going to get closer and closer, and education is going to be a huge part of that.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.